everyone. Welcome to another episode of Aquarian Light. I'm Ruth.
And I'm Adonis.
Today's episode is called Unified Theory of Life. Let me tell you why. I'm sure you've heard of the unified theory of everything, and it's the idea of uniting different theories that don't tend to harmonize because they're understanding the universe from a perspective of separation. And we've talked a lot about duality and how when we are seeing things from a dualistic point of view, we're not seeing reality. And through our misperception, we then take wrong action. The unified theory of life is getting at how we can come out of duality and have a unified and objective approach to every aspect of life. We were asked specifically by one of our listeners to address questions that young people often have about how to approach young adulthood. They're faced with lots of different decisions, different conundrums, and especially coming into spirituality, then they can get caught up in the mind and wonder how all these things tie in together. They can get caught up in overthinking and not really knowing how to find balance, how to harmonize their spiritual determination with their youthful ambition.
Right. So where do we want to start speaking about first?
Right. So we got a number of questions, and one of the first things that came up was one of our young listeners was maybe making some career choices, and they were wondering, what is the impact of these decisions and how does that relate to walking the path?
When it comes to careers, especially, it's a tricky thing that really comes down to really just conscious choice in general. I would think that when we make choices that are important, um, it's really important to make these decisions consciously, whether that be, in this case, we're obviously going to focus on the career, but certain things like moving, just like major changes, you know what I mean? Even maybe like personal relationships that need to end and begin, all of these things, we have to weigh these decisions in the sense of the law of karma, right? So in a sense, everything that we have set up for us is set up by our being to teach us the lessons that we need to, in a sense, right? So there's this concept of the psychological gym, and that concept relates to the fact that what we go through is specifically tailored to trigger the egos within us that we need to work on, right? So and also sometimes the more difficult the situation is, the more chance there is for us to get triggered on these things. So it's not necessarily just because, you know, we look for circumstances that might be better and that feel better towards being spiritual, that might be the best thing for us for the work that we need to do on ourselves. If we're to relate this to career, right? We might say be working in mundane job that doesn't feel very spiritual. Let's say we're working in an office or something. We're doing, like, I don't know, data entry, something very simple that a lot of people do a lot of, right? When you're just on a computer, you're crunching some numbers, things like that. And now we've come into spirituality. We find ourselves there. We find this way. And immediately, it doesn't resonate with us. What are we doing? We're being mechanical. We're wasting our lives doing this boring desk job. And immediately, we think we should quit and then, go become a yoga instructor or something, which, by the way, would be a phenomenal job. And maybe it'd be really fun and good for us. But the thing is that we have to, before we just make this rash decision and do such a quick change, is to weigh, why are we in this job in the first place, right? The being put us into a job such as data entry, maybe to test us on certain things. Maybe there's something about the boringness of something that triggers the frustrations in us. Maybe it's other employees that we don't get along with, or the boss or something like that, along that line, like like our superiors, right? Maybe there's some type of karma there that we're supposed to learn a lesson. That's why we're in that job. And the problem is if we just run away from that karma and we make a rash decision because it appeals to some new spiritual ego, let's say, that we just created, and it appeals to us to just run away and go do something that we think resonates better with that ego. We didn't actually clear those lessons. And the thing is that those lessons is with karma, it needs to be cleared. So just because we leave a place, or like we move a place, the karma will still follow us. And a lot of times it can be right, we were in the right place to help clear that karma the best. And if we make that rash decision and we change, not only will the bad karma follow us, but we might not be in the best position to clear it anymore. And then thus we're going to be stuck in it for longer. So there's things, when we make decisions, we really have to think on things, think things through, really weigh what we're supposed to get out of the experience before we make a move. And a lot of the times we might find out that we are where we need to be, actually. Maybe we don't need to make a move because we observe things in us that need to be worked on. It could also be that we observe things that need to be cleared, we clear them, and then it's still the right move to move on. But the point is that we should take our time when it comes to big life decisions, because everything is there for a reason. Like, we're not at any type of really quick change that comes up, especially when we're early in this journey and we just found spirituality. It's safe to say that's usually us having some type of ego or resistance to our karma, and it's and running away from it, in a sense, right? So you can't ever run away, you won't get away. So it's better to definitely just do the work where you at, because in essence most jobs are pretty neutral. I mean, we'll talk about it in a bit. There may be like a very few handful of things that maybe, yeah, we would want to change right away. But most of the time, it doesn't really matter what job you're in. Sure, obviously, it's great to do things that are maybe more aligned spiritually, that might bring us more dharma. But also, like I said, for our circumstances, we might be in the right place. So it's something to think about before we make any quick decisions.
Think as well, for young people, maybe they've never even had their first job. Like, so someone in data entry considering, shall I go over there and be a receptionist? Maybe it's a college job. But if they're thinking in terms of this big decision for my career, for my future, there can be so much identification that comes from the programming of a standard education that we can put a lot of weight into that decision, because we're identified with the personality, the grandeur, and whether it's the grandeur being some wonderful spiritual yoga instructor or something else, like becoming someone famous or someone that people report to. I remember before I got into management, there was this big hype around becoming a manager. And after you become a manager, you can think, oh, I don't want this job anymore, because you realize that uh, it's just where all the work piles up and everyone blames you, and you have a million people coming to you for answers, and it can be a lot to deal with. And maybe someone's makeup or their constitution, their unique set of gifts that they've been given in this incarnation don't necessarily predispose them to a job that society is saying this is a good job, you should do it, but they're terribly suited for it. They're energetically not suited for it. And yes, they can find themselves in there in a role like that, maybe to clear the karma of the pride that got them there in the first place, chasing after, I have people reporting to me. You can see what it's all about and see that it's not all it's cracked up to be. But when you're starting out in the very beginning, I think one of the first things is to not put too much stock into what a career, according to the horizontal, means at all, because that can cause us to make a grave misjudgment of the appropriate weight, the appropriate importance of what a career is on the horizontal plane. It's essentially a role that we play, and we play that role in a realm where time doesn't even exist the way we think it does. We're a soul, we're a structure of energy here, having experiences day in, day out, and being the consciousness of the being, have the ability to shape how we grow spiritually. And at this point in time, in this particular place in the universe, potentially build a soul. So we're in a kind of training ground where we're doing that work to dissolve ego, extract the wisdom from it, and build the soul. And yes, there are karmic aspects to it, but that was the first thing that I wanted to highlight, that it's not as important as you think it is in the way of what you hope to horizontally extract from that. And for anyone who's new to these studies, when we say horizontal, we're referring to the mundane life on Earth and all of the things that society offers that have nothing to do with what we call the level of being, or how we advance spiritually and raise our vibration to a higher level in both wisdom, liberation, and understanding.
Yeah, and you touched on a word that's very important there, which is role, and especially when it comes to like career, and, like having a family, and all of these things that are things that we aspire to, or we're told to aspire to over the course of our life, the time-bound life, the horizontal life, as you said. Um, the roles are things that we have to accept, right? As we're working through the construct, but we tend to become identified with our roles, whether that's like as you said, like being a manager in an office, or maybe you're a teacher, and that becomes our identity. We become that instead of realizing that it's just a role that we are playing. And when it comes to roles in a more macro sense, the most dangerous role that I think that we really see in society is this role of adulting. I believe Eckhart Tolle also mentioned that in his books, a few Power of Now and like A New Earth, but he talks about the role of adulting. Also, it's very, very toxic, right? In a sense of, you know, we want to have this career, family, we get money, like all these things. We think that we're supposed to, just go to this 9 to 5, provide, you know, be mature, which tends to mean be more mechanical and more in the ego, right? In a sense, psychology uses the term inner child, right, for what the being is. And that's maybe a little bit, skewed, because the being is innocent like a child, but it's also like it has wisdom beyond our ability to fathom, right? So it's not necessarily a child, but the thing is, and in our pure state, we do have that like innocence, like when we were kids, and it's frowned upon in this society to have that, right? In a sense, a fully actualized person, someone who's dissolved all their ego, who's become a master, let's say, right, would be in touch with their being, and with their being, they would have both wisdom and innocence. So it's not necessarily a bad thing to be connected to the simple pleasures, that inner joy, that inner peace, that people would say, oh, that's immature, that's childish. But these are just words that are co-opted. Immaturity is being obsessed with material things, and being petty and small-minded. Conservative people tend to actually get more conservative and closed-minded as they grow older, and they get more into their egos, and like, I can't teach an old dog new tricks, right? They start to lose that essence, they lose that connection to, like, and they use the excuse, oh, well, like, I'm getting older, I'm becoming an adult, and that's that there's the danger in that themselves. They hit like 30, and I have to be more serious, I have to be more an adult, I have to be even more in my ego, and care more about like materialness, and just things that don't matter, and don't you care about what's on the news, and don't you care about politics, and don't you care about all these things that don't matter, right? Or relatively don't matter, and even in a relative way, the majority of it is actually designed to keep you asleep, with some discernment. We watch like the media, even the entertainment that we watch, all of these things, right? You know, it's designed to feed the programming of the ego, not to really stimulate the consciousness. We think we're stimulating the intellect, but what is the intellect? The intellect is the ego. So we're actually just staying hypnotized, staying asleep, staying fascinated. And this is all for the role of being an adult, right? I can't watch things that are simple and happy. I have to watch something that's dark and gritty. I'm an adult, right? It has violence. It has to have sex, like all of these things, right? That's everything that we take in has to be like gloom and doom and low vibrations. And if you like anything that has any type of positivity to it, oh, that's for little kids, right? Well, maybe it's better to be a little kid, and we've forgotten what it's like, because, in a sense, children, even though they don't have the experience and wisdom of living their life, so they do have that aspect, the lack of experience, they're way more connected to their spirituality at a young age before the ego really begins to manifest. Early on in the child's life, they're still connected to some of their spiritual faculties. We'll put down a child talking about imaginary friends, for example, but maybe that's just the child's clairvoyance, so that then ends up dissipating. Or there's stories of children that remember their past lives and things of that nature. So yeah, it's just, adulting is a dangerous role to get identified with. Of course, any role is dangerous to be identified with over the top, because we need to disidentify from the matrix and the construct to really awaken the consciousness, right?
The key is actually the identification itself, right? Which is what we started with, where we're talking about how when someone's choosing a career, they have these big, grand thoughts about what a career actually means, and they expect to extract too much from it. What is the place of a career when we are in an incarnation? The circumstances that we find ourselves in contain lessons for us to learn, and that's that. And as long as the job that we are doing is not something that is creating a lot of negative karma, like we don't want to be an agent of karma dishing out the judgments of the law. Someone needs to do that, but it's not very good for the path. So roles like being a policeman, shooting people, or being a judge that gives people the death sentence, or being a politician that sends a country to war. These kinds of roles are something that we would want to avoid, because they'll be counterproductive to the work. But other than that, whether you are working in a cafe, working as a receptionist or a teacher or a nurse, these jobs are all, each of them will come with their own set of challenges that is related to the lessons that you have to learn. So for example, let's say that you're a bus driver, and someone might say, well, that's just such a mundane job. What are you going to learn from that? And then maybe you have a colleague that you see every day that does certain things that rubs you the wrong way, because you're identified and you have the perfect egos that match up with this person. Well, the energetic structure within you magnetized this other energetic structure from this other person to come into your life, and locked them into this role that they're playing with you, for you to be able to see yourself. And if you can't see it, comprehend it, dissolve it, transcend it, then even if you went to a different company or a different job, a completely different job, that same kind of person is going to be magnetized to you to bring you that lesson until you learn it.
Yeah, and that's why it's so important to disidentify from the illusion that the ego is, and see it for what it actually is. We talk a lot about treating the ego with what it's supposed to be. It's not bad per se, but it's created by us for us to learn. And when we understand the relationship to it, when our relationship to it isn't that it's something that is real, but rather just something that we created as to test us, then we can really, take advantage of situations that we get put in. We can really take advantage of that to observe ourselves and to improve ourselves. And you also touched on the fact that there pretty much isn't really any type of occupation or like location, right? That is all bad, all like that's going to have a negative effect on your path, right? You're put in a place for the reason of learning what you need to, like with a few exceptions. Um, and that comes down to, again, we're talking about karma. Yes, we learn lessons usually in our occupation, but you don't want to be in occupations that deal out karma. Um, in this day and age, though, realistically, most of the people that are in these fields are probably already that is their mission. They probably are people that are on the path of ascension with some discernment. People that are like politicians and stuff are there for that. People that have already maybe they're full of karma themselves and have expunged their chance of awakening in this time. And now there's a concept of them being born into these parts to dole out the karma for the negative hand of the path, the left hand of the path. That they're directed by their being, because there are some people that is their mission to, you know, do these negative things and keep the construct running and then go to the abyss. So I would say most of the people listening to this probably aren't really like gravitating towards jobs like that. But yeah, you don't want to be a policeman or politician. The things you'd have to do would get you bad karma. So if you have good intentions, if you're giving karma to others, then you receive karma for it. The law isn't about like, oh, did you do it for a good reason or a bad reason? It's impartial, right? So it's just like if you dish out karma, then you receive karma. If you dish out dharma, you receive dharma, and that's just how it works. Um, so any type of job, that's usually like a no-no. You don't want to outside of people that like law enforcement or like politicians. I think also like a bartender or like I guess nowadays with cannabis being legal, but like if you're like I guess doing or pharmaceutical maybe also as well, right? Anything that you're giving people like habit forming types of things, so that you're helping them like keep addictions going on and things of that nature could also bring bad karma.
That's very important because it relates to the impact on the consciousness itself,
Mhm.
right? So if you are serving alcohol and you're contributing to the sleep of the consciousness, then you have the karma of doing that to all of those essences. And even though, yes, they were party to that transaction, but you found yourself in that stream of actions. And so you're part of that web of karma now.
Mm.
Bartending. Sometimes some occupations, like some sales roles, involve wining and dining. So that's something to be aware of as well. When I've been in some sales situations that involve the serving of alcohol, it became a little bit tricky how to navigate. So if you find that maybe the whole role that you need to play is involving some kind of manipulation and serving alcohol and this kind of thing, even if you're not a bartender, but you're doing something like wining and dining and you're actively providing alcohol to other essences, then the thing that a lot of people may not realize is to walk the path requires dharma, and to access the teachings requires your being to buy and pay for them. So the more dharma we have, that will support us to do the work, to carry on the path. It allows us to come into the work, to stay into the work, and then the work that we do can feed the continuation of the path. So if you are in a daily occupation that is creating lots of negative balance in your spiritual checkbook, then you are going to run into a problem very quickly, karmically. that is going to make it difficult for you to walk the path. Now, we could do a role that sounds like a mundane role. Say you're a clerk in a bank, and then we might think, oh, it's fine, it's a mundane role. But we have to look at how we are behaving in that role, because the role is going to put pressure on us so that we can see our own weaknesses, whether it's people pleasing or lying, straight up lying out of fear, right? Misrepresenting situations because we don't want to have to deal with the people that we report to judging us or reprimanding us. So there's going to be these kinds of challenges for the essence to navigate that will be presenting themselves to the essence in a particular role, even if it's not this kind of role that is involving meting out karma.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to causality, and karma's dealt out a lot along that. So we come back to the idea that most jobs are neutral, right? And there's just lessons that we need to learn, and they'll be unique to our experience. Then it comes down to what we're doing in the occupation, and like I said, how we behave in that, right? There's cause and effect, right? We can approach a job, any job. Let's say we're selling, I don't know, insurance or something, right? We could be honest and not try to pressure people, and that might not be the best for our numbers, but karma dharma wise, it doesn't really affect us. Maybe we have to like deal with some pressure from not making enough sales from our boss, and we observe ourselves, we learn some lessons from that as well, but that'd be okay. But then if we're using high pressure tactics, and we're trying to lie to get people to buy things and stuff just to like boost their own numbers so that we do better in the job, and we're completely identified with trying to just succeed over hurting other people, well, then we're gonna get bad karma for that in that job, and not necessarily because of the job itself, but because of how we're behaving in the position. So, and like I said, it's all cause and effect. If you do positive things, if you're honest, then you'll get dharma, and if you do negative things, then you'll get karma. And everything is intentions, right? So uh, 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 we talked about causality and how everything is just actually just like our intentions that we set. So if we're going to set positive intentions, our environment, our reality, if we're doing things at a higher vibratory frequency, will tend to bring us higher vibrational things and more dharma. As well as if we do a lot of negative things, we'll tend to find ourselves in more negative situations and attracting more negative things to ourselves. Um, this even goes along with like new age concepts like law of attraction and stuff actually being kind of like black magic and stuff. It's like, yes, we can make that work. We can manifest something, money or something, or manifest like a car, right? If we really, really put our energy into it, but we're going to be using our negative will for that. We're using the egoic will. And what happens is that costs karma. If we manifest something negative, and we might think that's positive for us, right? Because we got a car, oh, that's positive. But I'm telling you right now, if you manifest yourself a material item to the law, that's a negative thing. So you get that car, but at what cost? Whereas if we manifest the dharma for ourselves, we might get an even nicer car because we got a nice promotion at our job or something and have more money and be able to afford a nicer car than we could even have imagined. And it wouldn't come at the cost of karma. Actually, we would have dharma and just now have that energy to energetically get that item, because we didn't do it for a desire of that item. A lot of the times when we get dharma and we're actually helping people and we're actually being selfless, we actually will have the means to get more than we could possibly even imagine. The irony is, though, that you probably then won't want all that stuff anyway, because you're the type of person that understands how all this works, and at that level of understanding, you probably wouldn't then go, and then let's say you did get all these finances, you probably wouldn't go out and buy a bunch of material junk anyway. But the truth is, it is true. You can end up getting more wealth by just manifesting a positive reality than to actually try to go get money and then build up the karma on yourself for it. So like things, that's why like teachings like that are very, very dangerous. Black magic. I mean, the ego likes to co-opt esoteric knowledge, and it's very easy for the ego to be like, oh, well, yeah, now this is becoming more public knowledge, and we have chakras, and we have these psychic abilities, and the ego can use these psychic abilities too. So why don't we use it for something egoic? But there's always a price to pay when we are doing things for the ego because of the law, and the law is going to the causality of the negative intentions, and negative being, like I said, egoic. It doesn't have to be. We talk about duality, pretty much everything in duality is egoic. It's attaching to the contract. So we could be doing things for a bad reason, or we could do it for a, quote unquote, morally good reason, something righteous or whatever, whatever we convince ourselves, or this is beneficial to our family or whatever. But to the law, that's negative because it's egoic. Positive energy thing would be things that are conscious, selfless, not selfish. Whether if it's selfishly good, it's still selfish, right? So we have to remember that.
There's a saying from one Indian guru, I think it goes like, you can have the whole world when there's no more you to have it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really true. You touched on this cosmic law, if you will, where whenever someone goes at something directly and that ambition and that intention is tainted by desire, the curse of desire that brings suffering and pain, then they go after this thing and they chase it. Either they will push that very thing away, or they will get it in corruption. And this is very important because that is how the ego works. It has a form of trickery where it promises to deliver something that even the essence and the consciousness senses is a need, or there's something positive or useful there, something beneficial. But then through a misperception of reality that is caught in duality and separation, then through attachment and desire and ego, going straight at the thing vehemently with will and determination. And then the person achieves the thing, but it's not really what they thought it was going to be. And I can give a very simple example. It's not the deepest example, but just to help us to understand how it works. There's one story of a lady who was obsessed with blackberries, and she just kept thinking, I must have a property with blackberries, or like a blackberry bush, and I really want this. And she was full of desire. So she was starting the manifestation process. She was focusing her energy, her intention on this thought, and just thinking for years. She was thinking, I want to have this beautiful house with blackberries, and I love blackberries. And then eventually, some years later, it manifested. She and her husband bought a property, and lo and behold, the backyard was full of blackberries. And those blackberry bushes, she manifested them, but they became a nightmare. They were a terrible weed. The kids got cut on the blackberries. They were getting injured, and the whole yard was overgrown with them, to the point that they just saw it as a nuisance. They didn't even pick or enjoy any of the blackberries. They just couldn't handle it. And in the end, they decided that they were going to spray all of the blackberries. So they sprayed them all, they killed them. And it was only when they were spraying them that this woman realized the whole series of events, and she saw how her desire had manifested, and it was a poisoned desire. And of course, on another level, this kind of thing takes place, not necessarily I manifested blackberries, but let's say someone is chasing a relationship and they're full of clinging and fear, and then it ends up pushing the person away, or they attract a person that's very bad for them, and there's a lot of suffering in that relationship. All of these scenarios that can arise when we are stuck in our desire and going directly at the thing, whether it's, I want this career, I want this role, I want to be in my pride and feel very accomplished and having people respect me. I want people to think highly of me. Whatever it is we are trying to extract while we're in identification is going to come back to us negatively in some way.
Yeah, I think it's a good way to look at it is and we've talked about this. I think we talked about it a little bit in the prior episode. We'll probably talk about it a lot in the next one when we talk about Star Wars. But it's how the ego really it tells us lies, right? But it tells us lies with based with the truth in it. You know what I mean? There's always this element of truth. It's like even if we look at like a lot of like we talked about the reason why I said we talked about this a little bit before, where we talked about like how like a lot of black magic schools, right? It's like very rarely are they actually like a school of Satan, right? Like no, they're esoteric schools that tell you they're gonna raise a kundalini and you're gonna, you know, awaken and ascend, right? Except the only thing is they tell you, you know, you don't have to get rid of your ego and you can strengthen your ego and it's all great. But everything else all sounds the same because we can awaken consciousness through the ego, and then the ego can use it. The ego actually wants us to awaken that consciousness without getting rid of the ego, you know? And that's the thing, right? So all of these things sound so good and they sound so similar. It's almost like the exact same thing. It's like, oh, it's this one little detail that's off that, oh, you have to get rid of the ego though to attain these things, to attain the enlightenment. And the thing is, it's like it's so easy then to find, you know, here'll be the one truth, or there'll be like a few mystery. There's more than one mystery school, but you know, there'll be like a handful of mystery schools that are very small, and even then most people don't understand the symbology, and maybe you find a teacher that understands the symbology, and you know, and you start to do it and you want to awaken and you get all to it, and then you're just like, man, your ego doesn't like the fact that it has to get rid of it. All of a sudden the ego starts being like, oh, there's something wrong with this, or you know, it starts to get defensive, it starts to see like paranoid things and everything. And even though that pretty much every mystery school basically tells you you're responsible for your own work, you're responsible for yourself. If you feel any resistances, you don't have to do anything, you know, just do the work and maybe you'll come to realize this is yourself. This is advice from somebody to tell you, but nobody's forcing you to do anything. It's not a cult. The ego will tell you it's a cult and actually have you join a cult. In fact, you know, it'll have you follow the cult that wants to isolate you away from the teachings. It tells you that, oh, here's my teaching, which is the same thing, except for you should build the ego, you know? And there's like a million of those, right? Like there's this many actual mystery schools, and then there's like this many, you know, black magic schools that all tell you that they're going to help you ascend on the path and come from like some lower understanding that intellectualizes everything and uses a lot of big fancy words, and it will trick you and confuse you and all this stuff. But really all it wants you to do is, you know, start working on your chakras so that the ego can use your powers and feed off of those, the more energy that you built up. So it's there's always like that kernel of truth to everything the ego says. And the same thing goes with that idea of we're talking about the manifestation or the law of attraction, right? You know, you say, of course, delivers whatever. Well, we'll deliver you the item that you want. That's great. Doesn't tell you that you're gonna get bad karma. It doesn't tell you that there'll be something negative that comes along with it, but it will actually deliver, because if it didn't deliver, then nobody would believe it and do the thing, and that gives it the energy. So it has to back it up somehow. It backs it up, you know, like 90%, and the 10% is that you lose a little bit more of your soul and you don't even notice it because you get what you want, or you get what it told you, or it plays to whatever it is and manipulates you, and most of it is true, so you only see the truth, and the part that you're turning a blind eye to is the part that you wanted to turn a blind eye to anyway, so it plays to that, you know, while giving you really what you thought you wanted, you know, for the rest of it.
But the
So,
misperception continues when you get the thing, right? Like, so if
mhm.
somebody is, let's say that they're in pride and they just want to be respected and looked up to and liked, they want everyone to hear what they have to say and get a lot of attention from that. And then they think, what is it they're actually chasing after when they're in that ego? Well, they recognize on some level, very deep down, that there is a kind of majesty in their being, but they misperceive and think that's the majesty for me, the ego. And how can I reach that level? I need to build it up by doing things in the physical plane, in duality, so that everyone will look up to me and respect me and like me, the false identity, the false structure down here. So somebody that is trying to garner this kind of support and admiration might behave very absurdly, right? Think of the person who over prepares for an interview or for a presentation, and then they're so nervous and worried because they've replayed the scene in their head a million times, and are people going to see me like this or like that, and how shall I stand and what angle, and oh, I'm going to say this line, and this line is going to, oh, this is going to knock their socks off in that proposal. Or maybe somebody going on stage and then they think, oh, how am I going to look, and people are going to look at me and worship me, and I'm going to get all this energy. And you see these say celebrities that have followed this to the end, and they're just full of darkness and pain and disillusionment. None of it means what they thought it meant, and they're depressed. All of, where is that grandeur and that admiration and all the things they thought it was? It's, the scenario doesn't deliver on it, but they thought it was going to, and they technically got the thing they imagined, but it's all wrong. It's all perverse, tainted, and full of pain, because that's how the ego works. That's the trick.
Yeah, kind of makes me think of the actor Jim Carrey, who ended up going through awakening, but he talks about after he went going through awakening and then talk about spiritual things. And he talked about how like early on in his life when he was like broke and not actor, he wrote himself a check of like $10 million to put in his pocket. And he like basically manifested that in the first movie that he got signed for, he had to get paid $10 million or whatever, and how that actually worked. But whatever, it's still like whatever, didn't end up working out exactly as he wanted. Um, but I thought you made a very valid observation there that touches back on something that we've talked about before, and just we were talking, I think, mystical pride, but the fact that this idea that we do anything, we don't even walk the path, right? The being walks the path internally. Is something that we stress a lot, right? Our purpose is, well, our mission is to express the being's purpose in a unique way that has been designed karmically, and for us to be an expression of the being. So by doing that expression, it allows the being internally to walk the path, like it allows our higher self to take these initiations. But the ego, like you said, likes to co-opt, and we'll say like, well, I'm doing this many initiations, or there's even like some black magic schools, I believe, they like hand out initiations for things that you do in the physical or something that you achieve some knowledge. Like took these exams, and well, here's your 30-second degree on the path of initiation for like
They have a
passing.
ceremony and
Yeah,
give you some
pay
medal.
some money, take a few tests, learn some esoteric wisdom, and then they deem you you're a master. We haven't done anything really except for join a cult, but you're a
Get
master.
tricked.
Yeah. So it's important to remember that we're like this vessel, like we're nothing really. It's like we
That's
die.
part of the misperception. That's the
Mhm.
misperception, is to think that we're all that, and to not realize how insignificant we really
Mhm.
are. And that's not just to be like self-bashing or depreciating, but when you look at the delusions of grandeur and self-importance, like the person who can't line up waiting for their flight and says, don't you know who I am? It's ridiculous how we can inflate ourselves far out of proportion.
Well, it's because we don't really know who we are, right? So we talk about self-observation, self-remembering, and I think of the Jesus quote, "I am that I am," and that's the observer, right? That's the being, right? But when we self-remember, what we're doing is pulling back from the ego of this vessel or this meat suit or whatever, and we're connecting to the being. That is the being that there, even if it's like only for that split second, because we're still very asleep and stuck in the construct, right? But this person that we have, this role that we're playing, right, doesn't mean anything. It dies, goes away, never to be heard from or seen again. And then yes, we, us, I, but the real I, the I am, the self, yes, that is eternal and keeps going on, and that is us. Like we like, but we don't think of ourselves as us. We think of ourselves as this, and doesn't matter at all. Like I said, the simple purpose of it is to have some experiences for the I am, which is within us, and we don't connect to quite enough, if at all, right? Like most of the population that like has completely either severed their connection or is so asleep or highly in danger of losing that connection. So yeah, it's just it is. We have to remember that it's like us, the observer, is what matters, and not this person or what we do or roles we play, what job we have, what our family is not even a real family in that sense. You have a family that you may be connected to karmically with your soul, and that may include members of your physical family. It may include some of your friends, uh, may even include some people that live on the other side of the planet that you haven't met yet. And then later on, when the time is right, you'll be brought together, and they'll be the closest person that you've ever met in your whole life. Um, and that those are souls that you've gone through many, many, many lifetimes with. Sometimes maybe you're family members, sometimes maybe you were a couple, like things like that. And then these groups of souls, they can interchangeably, but you're always in each other's story. That's your real family. And like I said, that doesn't mean some of the people in your family aren't part of that, but there's also people in your family that are probably karmic, just like there's people that you date that are probably karmic, right? Not every relationship you have is going to be somebody that was a soulmate. In fact, most relationships you'll have in today's day and age, considering the state of society, are going to be karmic, but karmic in the sense of bad, like you're getting karma for it. So you're having a relationship with someone that's going to, probably harm you, cause you trauma that you're supposed to learn from. And that's why most people have negative relationship experiences outside of once they find that like partner that then they stay with. But a lot of your earlier relationships tend to always end up being negative and having a lot of conflict, and that's because they're what we call a karmic soulmate, meaning they're there to bring you karma. It's a little confusing because soulmate is in the name, but they're actually not one of your soulmates in that sense. It's actually usually somebody, I think, at least in New Age, they say it's somebody that you may have harmed in prior lifetimes. So then they come back to give you your payback, like maybe you like robbed them or something, and now they come back and now they're that crazy ex, you know, to pay you back for like stealing from their store when you were living in China in the 1800s or something. I don't know.
And sometimes there's some energetic lessons internally for the person, whether there's someone who doesn't have enough love and they need to learn how to be more kind and caring. Maybe someone will come along and show them how bad they were in a past lifetime, in terms of emotional damage that they've done to people where they were inconsiderate or hurtful. Or sometimes it can be connected to a big one that often happens is abandonment, right? And people who have these abandonment wounds will then attract people that will repeat the abandonment process until they get enough pain from it that they hopefully comprehend and transcend that energetic aspect that is interplaying with why are they attracting these unavailable people, because there's a kind of unavailability inside of them where they're not in a place of divine love and oneness. They're in a place of separation and they're attracting another drama of separation.
And those things that recur are interesting. You talk about abandonment, which is something that was one of the traumas that I really had to deal with most of my life. Not to get too into personal things, but it's funny, you see, even after you learn these lessons, right? There'll still be like more reoccurrences, just like check, like, or like there'll be certain things that are still related to it. So maybe you like don't get triggered by abandon anymore, but there's something else that you had to like learn from the situation. So you'll still might still have people that are like come into your life and abandon you or something, and it doesn't hurt anymore for that reason. But there's something else that you have to learn because maybe just like how you deal with those situations or those type of people, you picked up some other type of egos. So it's like, all right, you're okay with you're not being clinging anymore, but you need to learn to not be like so rude or something something else. So you'll still see the same patterns recurring, you know what I mean? Because you maybe learn the big lesson, but there's still some little mini lessons that are in there too. So you still have to, for the whole scenario to end, solve all the little puzzle pieces, not just the big one. Usually the big one's the first one, right? Because that's what completely blinds you and identifies you with it. But then even once you've disidentified with it, you might still see it like repeat a few more times, and you'll be like, oh, there's this other little thing that also like comes up when this happens or this or that. It's interesting. Karma is very interesting. It's a lot. more complex than it's presented. And obviously when we're coming into the teachings, it's presented in a certain way, like this happened, so this causes this, and that's a simplified way of looking at it, because it's mostly true. Like I said, there's usually some like main arc, and then there's that, but then there's there's these concepts of like, first of all, there's like the main inner psychological song that like entombs us, that like kind of like main ego that we have to deal with. It goes by many acronyms, and it's been referred to in many things. I know Gurdjieff talked about it. It's also talked about in Gnosis and other things of that nature. But it could be PPP, PCP, F, PPE, different things like that, right?
You don't
Um,
even have to worry about what all
yeah,
those stand for.
but
It's just
yeah,
the principal
but
aspect.
yeah, but that aspect is always like a very big and overarching narrative, and you have like, it's so much like deeper. It's like the main theme to your movie. So like I brought up the like abandonment trauma was one of the things, but maybe it's like pride. For most people, it's either like pride or lust, right? But it's like a really like intricate thing. So it's like has all these like different layers to it and different flavors, and you get triggered on it constantly. You work on a little bit of it, it doesn't actually go away. It'd be like if you got rid of all your ego, the last ego you got rid of will still be that one. Like it's gonna be with you. It's the one that you need to see the illusion of it first to unplug. It's like that, like that main thing that until you see the illusion of that, like you won't unplug from the matrix, and you'll still be unconscious. It's so powerful that it will just keep you asleep. Like you need to move that before you can even do the work. It's like that guardian of the threshold test that we've talked about before. That is that main thing, that main trauma, like facing our own fears and balancing our energy, and awakening from duality. That's what keeps us trapped in duality. But when you come down to looking at things like that, of that karmic nature, and you're talking about like over a lifetime and all the threads that go into something like that, it's not so simple as just like this and then this. It's like there's a little bit of this, and then maybe there's like, oh, and then like when I meet people like this, they do this thing, and this makes me do this, and then when I get into another situation, I act like this, and this is also related back to this, and then when I'm in a relationship, I act like this, which is also related to this, and then this is how I am with my family, and then it's also related to this, and it's like just like this like spider web of all these things that sometimes don't even necessarily seem related, but they actually all are related and trace back to that one like giant root. And it can become like the depth of the work that it takes to actually like truly observe what's going on, as far as just like surface level, like, oh, I got angry, and I get angry when like somebody says something mean to me. Well, that's like, I mean, it's where we start. But as you start to really get into the work, and you start to see these like deep rooted things and certain things that you wouldn't even think about yourself. I mean, things that are related to even past life traumas and things like that. It becomes so, it's a lot light heavier, a lot more intricate. You have a lot more subtle details, a lot more things being connected where you didn't see the connections. So all of that is very important. And I kind of went off on a little tangent there, but
But it is important
yeah,
because we are trying to understand life through the context of the work. And maybe we went off the deep end, but we're unpacking what we mean when we say the work. There's a very important point here, because the question was asked to us, how shall I see my career and university and study and all these things through the lens of spirituality? And it's very important to understand that when we walk a spiritual path, this encompasses our whole life. So it's not so much as I'm going to apply this new lens and I'm going to see things like a good Gnostic. That's like a religion. It's that when we are picking up the tools of a spiritual discipline and we're doing a spiritual work and we say yes to the path, every single thing that comes our way is part of this work. And how we take action consciously, how we perceive, how we seek to perceive objectively, these are all part of the work. It's not something separate, and it's not a special kind of filter. They're one and the same. All of our tests are going to come Sometimes it feels like it comes out of left field, right? You thought, oh, this is a mundane time. Maybe the being is giving me a break. And then boom, something big and different comes your way. And there can be so many layers to those tests. As a young person starting out in life, we can be so identified and be all excited because we haven't had the brutal impact of life hit yet. We haven't had, maybe if you're, say you're 18, right, and you're starting uni, or just started uni, you haven't had your first heartbreak yet. You haven't had your first boss growl at you. You haven't been fired, and you haven't moved out of living with mom and dad. So you haven't seen nothing yet. But now you're putting your hand up and saying, being, I want to walk the path. I want to undertake a spiritual discipline and be a participant in the growth of the being and be the cognition of the being on this realm, in this realm, on this plane, to learn lessons. And so everything is going to be wildly different. How we approach everything is going to be different, and we're not choosing a career or choosing to move or choosing a boyfriend or girlfriend based on so much as what we want anymore, but we are seeking to align with the being and to understand the events that are unfolding for us and the decisions that are being brought to us as opportunities to learn.
Yeah, I think it's really important what you said about how it's not just about like switching a lens or switching a filter. It's, everything in life, we need to realize that it's not us. It would just identify that's not the point of being here. Like the point of life is to learn about ourselves and to awaken. It is not to, you know, do anything that they tell you that's everything that you think, whatever filter you can change your filter, that's wrong. That's not what we're here to do. It's not us. And we need to come to that realization, and we need to disidentify from that illusion of that there is no good or bad or any of that. It's only conscious and unconscious, and we need to disidentify that and see that, and only then can we actually start to awaken and do the work. And I was just going to give a good example about like what it takes into like observing, and how you said like everything. First of all, everything is a test. Like what we're doing and playing a game right now, the littlest thing that happens in a day is probably some test. If you were a master, you probably would see the karma and everything. Even once you start doing the work, you'll probably miss things all the time, right? But definitely minor things might miss, but the major things, if there's something major happening at any point in time, you can be sure that it's a test, and it's not always as simple as you think. So I was just gonna give an example about something that's happened to me this week, and what it takes to looking into like karma and things like that. But I had signed up for a Vipassana course, I believe it's like last November. And at the time, it was before I'd really like had my internal initiation on karma, and I really like meditated on it as much as that came later. That was like in the earlier this year. And the idea was, it's free. You go 10 days. I could go do. It's a chance to have silent meditation, good for the work, right? But the thing is like, and I didn't think too much of it. They want you to do Vipassana, but I'm like, whatever. To take advantage of the fact that there's a place for me to go to retreat and do the silent meditation, and I'll just do my energy work and whatever. There's no way anybody can tell. They can't see what's going on internally in me. And at the time, it seemed all right. After that, I believe I had signed up for the course, and then we had I think something else came up, like another retreat for something else. So then I had to cancel it, and I tried to move it to the prior week. I'd picked 1 out of 2 weeks, and there was now a wait list for that. The irony is that the retreat that I moved it for then ended up getting canceled. So then I made the joke, I guess, like, whatever, divinity just didn't really want me to go to Vipassana. That's what it looked like, right? Oh, it got me to like cancel it. Like I wasn't supposed to go. Fine. Never really think about it. Then this week, like 2 days before the course that I was on the wait list for, and I thought I was going to get off the wait list. I get off the wait list, right? And I'm like, oh, that's crazy. I didn't think I'd go. And like I was like, I probably can't, do this. And let me see like what my work schedule is like. It's so last minute, and oddly enough, it's like everything lined up perfectly. I run room rentals and stuff, and it was just like I had a whole bunch of like long bookings coming in right the day before I would have to leave, so there was not even any work for me to pass off to anybody. I could easily have just like left and gone and gotten paid and all of that. It would have been great. And it just lined up. It was like perfect. It looked like it was a divine intervention, like, oh, it's a sign I'm supposed to go, right? And then, but something just like felt off. And then I didn't even have to really meditate on it, to be honest. It's like I've had like comprehensions. I've worked on karma a lot over the first half of this year. And it just really like when I like really just sat down and analyzed what was going on, what I realized is that yes, of course I could go and it wouldn't harm anybody and that'd be great, right? But I was being tested by the universe, because here's the thing: for me to go and take advantage of this thing is free and the free meals and whatever, it would be selfish and and I'd be doing it for my work, but I'm not going there for what it's for. And in a sense, like their course is, that's, it may be a school of a lesser level understanding, what we would call a soul school, something that doesn't have the full complete teachings, but it's still a valid school for helping people dissolve ego and get started on an esoteric path. Maybe people that are on a spiral path or whatever, and in a sense that's their practice of sacrifice. So like they have all three factors, but they have two of them, and one of them is to practice sacrifice for humanity. So in a sense, by doing that, they're practicing sacrifice to teach people their method. So it'd be me taking advantage of their sacrifice and not, for my own personal gain, which already one is selfish. It's dishonest, which is lying. Lying is also internally. These are all things like you shouldn't lie. You shouldn't be selfish. You shouldn't steal. Shouldn't steal. You shouldn't lie. Right. That's practical, but in a sense, it's also like energetical. Internally, these laws are like, so like I shouldn't like steal people's energy, in the sense we go steal people's energy. And you shouldn't lie to yourself, lie as your intentions. You're lying to yourself, you're internally. So there's that going on. But then also too, it's like there may be someone, right? I'm taking the spot of someone who actually, for their journey, that would be helpful, right? I'm like, that also would be negative karma. So I ended up just canceling and letting the spot go to somebody else. But long story short, that's all the things that go into like making a decision like that. Like it would have been easy to just been like, oh, look, it lined up. Divinity even wanted me to go. And that's exactly how it was designed to be, right? If I wasn't, there's no depth in the work. If I don't actually like sit there and consciously actually weigh what's going on, oh, it's so easy. I just got miraculously accepted into this course. And it happens to be that everything is lined up, that I have no responsibilities, and I can just go. How easy would that be, right? So that's the contract testing you, because it's so easy for the ego. The ego is like, oh yeah, sure, go do that. Get the free 10-day meditation and with food included and all that, right? So that's just a small example. And these things happen all the time. And as you do the work longer, you'll actually see like so much where we just get like these like constantly we're getting tested by the construct. And it's not always like the obvious thing. I mean, a lot of times it is obvious. It might be like you go to a bar and somebody tries to like seduce you or something, and there's clearly like lust or something. But sometimes it might be a little bit more subtle, like what happened, where it's just like it seems like subjectively, this is actually a positive thing, but it's actually objectively internally a negative still. And a lot of times, though, they're overtly negative both, but like, you know what I mean? Anyway, the point is you're always constantly getting tested, and you need to always consciously weigh your decisions.
That reminds me of a very good teaching that applies to how we do the work and how we bring consciousness into our decisions. It says the work should never be pendular, emotional, or circumstantial. And what you described was circumstantial. So saying that it would be a conscious decision to look at the series of events and the circumstances and say, oh, this is arranged for me by the being. Well, yes, it was, but as a test, not that you should do it. And pendular means going one way and then the other. So up and down, inconsistent. I got to meditate for 10 hours a day for a few days, and then I'm going to go drink in the bar and just go off off the deep end, off the rails, and then do some drugs and then come back and meditate. So that is an extreme example, but that's pendular. And then emotional, whereas they say, oh, I just, I really felt like I should do it. I had this feeling, I really liked them, when it was lust, and I just felt like it was right. Or drugs, I felt this feeling and I just had this big emotion. It must have been from my being.
Right.
And so if someone is led by their emotions, there's actually a verse in the Bible that says that the person that wavers is like a wave in the sea or like a leaf in the wind. So the person that is just has no groundedness, they're not grounded at the center of the decisions that they're making in consciousness, then they're just blowing around based on everything happening around them. So meaning that they will be failing the test. The test will come, but then they won't pass them. And uh, the universe is kind in that way, or the being is kind. We can say whatever terminology you want to use, in that the kindness is this cooperation with the intelligence of the law to amplify the lesson, because you didn't get it when it was subtle. So it's going to become louder. And there's no judgment in that. We all miss lessons or fail tests, and then we look back and go, oh no, I failed. And then, if we pass them, we shouldn't be all smug about it either. It's just part of the process. But when you get a very glaring lesson, then you can be sure that you missed it when it was subtle. And then maybe you can look back and go, oh, okay, that's when it was subtle. But coming back to the unified theory of life, what we're talking about for young people to have some guidance, if we were to summarize, essentially choosing what to study, choosing your role, how you apply yourself in university, these things are not as important as the lessons that are being served to us, and cooperating with the being for the path, and understanding the part that karma plays in all of this. When we disidentify and we come out of being attached to desire and the illusion that is inside of our mind, all of the things that the stories we tell ourselves, the accusations we make, a sense of injustice, or it's not fair, or having criticisms about people around us, when we remove ourselves and come back into the awareness to see what is really going on, then all of it is beautiful and meaningful and helpful, and we can learn so much from it. There was another question, and I feel like we've answered it, but just in case. So the other question was, this young person asked, how much energy shall I put into things? And they're specifically thinking of what we talked about, when a young person has their whole life ahead of them, and the promise of horizontal is over exaggerated in their mind at that point. And so in that delusion, they're motivated to really be a crazy student and study hard and become successful because of all those dreams.
Yeah, I think with that, and I mean, it's hard to say for me because I didn't really find my way to the path till my 30s. But I think with that, just even now, seeing how things work, it's important for us to use our energy and put it towards the work, in the sense of when we find that balance and that psychological stability and that inner peace, it's actually a lot easier to manage and get the stuff done that we need to do anyway. So in the sense of like, all of a sudden, making sure to be organized and remember everything and get your work done, um, doesn't seem like so much stress, and you might even be able to like increase your workload, but it doesn't feel like it's like a pressure or you're like forcing it. You know what I mean? It's just that you're literally more aware and you're more present. And when you're more and more present, amazingly you get more things done without you even having to stress or try. Like when you used to, you would stress and try and get half as much done as you do if you just like stay calm, patient, and present. But you're so aware that you don't forget things, you don't let something slip your mind, you're on top of everything, even though you're not running around like a chicken without your head. You just, kind of stay balanced and get your things done. And I don't know, I feel like for me personally, I used to deal with things like ADD and bipolar and things like that. And I don't even take meds anymore. And, you know, I feel very balanced and I feel like my workflow and work rate is probably the best it's ever been. So, and I'm 35, almost 36. So, and that just started in this time frame and time period, right? So it's not even like my physical mind and body is at the same like capabilities it was as a youth either. um but just being more present and less scatterbrained and more focused in a sense, especially the focusing is hard because you're dealing with ADD or really everything is all over the place. um yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't feel like I'm rushing through things or ever really feel stressed. I mean, sometimes if there is too much for a day, you just leave it for the next one when you're not impatient and you're not stressing things. It also doesn't usually seem to feel like as big of a deal either if it takes you one more day to get something done. But I would say in general and in total that I think that the being more present, being more aware is more conducive to making sure you more efficient and get things done. And like I said, without even stressing it or really worrying about too much about things, and also making the right clear decisions and not overdoing things or doing something that's unnecessary, not overextending yourself. Like you're coming from a place of consciousness, so not only are you getting things done more efficiently, but you're getting things done that need to be done and not wasting your time on other things that the ego may think is important but really isn't. You seem to you can weigh what is important and what isn't, what your body needs and when it does it, when you need to rest, when you don't, things of that nature.
The consciousness is never frazzled. It's never running around like a chicken without its head. And that just reminded me of this colleague we had some time ago. She was, she had just come out of university and she was used to being a stress ball. And her new role, she wasn't given any pressure. She was just told, take as long as you need and learn everything and then do your job. That's it. But because she was so used to being stressed, her ego tried to recreate the same stress in her new role where there was no pressure on her. So she began doing all of these things subconsciously to make it stressful, and including making thousands of pieces of paper and having them all over the table and not knowing what she was doing, and then losing the papers and always going like from one thing to another. She did seem to have ADD, which has been, like in modern times, has been said to be not for everyone, but for a lot of people related to technology. And there's research around how a lot of people have it from technology rather than genetically, or we could say, yes, there's an energetic aspect to everything, but the physical component is how they interacted with the technology. And she basically was an example of the opposite of what we would be doing if we were centered and balanced. So if you're a young person and you are seeking to have a spiritual discipline and a spiritual life, seeking to walk the path, then when you start to observe, at least this is one marker you can notice. Okay, I'm in university and I'm studying. How am I being in this time period in my life? Am I running around crazy and stressed and worrying about my exams? So what if you fail? Hey, what if you even flunked out? Would it be the end of the world? There'd be lessons in that too. So not to get too deep into it, but there's so much conditioning behind the whole thing. Uh, we can practice renunciation. We don't have to be attached to any outcomes, whether we pass or fail, get this job or that job, whether we are broke today or have a fat paycheck tomorrow, to be neutral to all of it. And that's going to be something that can help us move closer towards what we keep talking about, that disidentification. Because some people it can be a sudden thing, and some people maybe you get closer and closer and closer to it, and then you might have a big test and shift, and you come out of the illusion of thinking I'm this body, I'm this life. All of these desires matter at all. So practicing renunciation can help you in not attaching too much importance to any of these things. And then you'll be on your way towards liberation. There was a final question. And again, I think we've covered all of these, but just in case, it was a question about if we could summarize what is to be said about a young person coming into spirituality, young adulthood. And this is probably weird for both of us because we were not in spirituality in our young adulthood.
Yeah, I guess it's also, I think it's a little bit of an interesting conundrum in the sense of also, I think our generation didn't grow up the same way as a lot of the youth that's coming in right at this moment. We're probably like the last generation that like didn't like grow up with like cell phones and like tablets as children and things like that. So we're still like old enough to remember when like, there weren't cell phones, even though we were kids when it happened. But like, people had pagers in the 90s and stuff, right? So uh, I would say the biggest challenge, because it's really a challenge for us too, right? I mean, we're older, but we're still living in the same world, and this is just in general. This world is the overstimulation and how easy it is to get identified with everything and everything because we're just getting bombarded with everything, right? So it's entertainment, it's media, it's social media, which is so dangerous. Um, Especially I think to a younger generation that grew up with it as the norm. Um, we're of the generation where it came out while we were still young, so we were like the first one to get caught by it, really. And then it actually was it. Then it was finally like our parents came around later. They got into it later to be like cool and connect with their kids, but we were probably the first generation that really got hooked to social media and things like that. But you know, when you grow up and that was it's there, right? Like at least it wasn't always there for us. Came up maybe we were in like high school and things like that. Um, so there's still a few of us that were like, all right, this is kind of weird and evil, but even most people our age is really, just caught up in that. I think these things are designed to suppress the consciousness. Everything that we watch is designed to suppress the consciousness. Politics, media, organized religion. I mean, it's always been like that, but it's like extra bad now because of the way that they can deliver it really because of social media and the internet and all of this stuff blowing up. Um, and I think it's just being able to abstain and unplug, not just before you can even unplug from the construct itself, but being able to withdraw yourself from all of the noise so that you can even give yourself a chance to unplug from the construct itself, because there's just so much density and darkness pretty much everywhere now, right? Yeah, you think, I mean, obviously, like, in cities there's darkness and there's a psychological gym there, but even if with social media and the media and all that stuff, you could live in a farm in Iowa and still be in your cell phone. Maybe you interact with less people outside on the street, but at home you're probably actually you might even more on your computer and more into your phone in a situation like that, right? So and these algorithms and everything, and it's like designed to move faster than like your intellect can even function, and just keep you trapped and sucked in. So it's really important to break away from that, limit ourselves to these sort of things, if not eventually stop completely. Well, to as much extent as you can. When I say stop completely, I mean like just not making it a hobby anymore. I think it's impossible almost to never interact with it at all. Like maybe like for like actual like work and stuff like that. But for leisure, I think we want to get to the point where we don't use it at all for leisure. Like it's all, the only time like
There is
I
no
get on,
leisure in
so
that
yeah, I
stuff.
like I do know I don't go on social media for leisure at all. It's either to like communicate with people or for like promotion of something, you know. That's where we want to get to, you know. But I mean, even in the beginning, just even if we could just limit our time with things like that, I think that's the most dangerous thing, especially for the youth, because it's like such a culture around that with the generations that are underneath us. Because yeah, when you're like plugged into that, I mean, like forget about it. You know, it's literally meant to train your mind to be on autopilot. Um, and you don't even then get the chance to observe yourself and you know, even give yourself a chance to come to the realization of the observer, because you're basically just a robot and like, you know, sucked into these things. So and so hard. Meanwhile, we're on the internet, right, trying to give this advice. So like, you know, there's levels to
We're
it, but
going, yeah, we're going where people are. The
mhm.
Yeah, I wanted to add a point just around that on the same topic, just to clarify that whilst it seems like the whole of society is designed to keep the consciousness asleep, it's also that the external is a manifestation of what is inside. So the external is a manifestation of the profound sleep of the consciousness within. So who designs these horrible things that trap us? It's a self-fulfilling, or it's a self-feeding loop. People are asleep, so they design things to keep us asleep. And we're in this hypnotic process of behaving like a zombie. So what will a zombie do? A zombie will go and scroll on social media for hours. So it's not like it's the fault of your phone. It's the sleep of the consciousness at large. And all of these things we're seeing outside are just manifesting what's inside. I think even in New Age, they say that uh, everyone becoming connected through the internet is the externalization of us trying to recreate the lost aspect of us being a unity. So we are one consciousness and we are all connected, but we've fallen into separation. And now being attached to the 3D and the physical, then we go and create this physical web to link us all back together again, except it's part of duality and it's like the false version of the true reality. So it's interesting. But I remember when I first came back into Gnosis after being out for a long time, one of the first things that they talked to us about was social media use and the use of phones. And they said, if you are hanging out on social media, uh, don't think that anything good is going to come from it. Some people think, oh, but I'm going there for these great spiritual quotes. And they said, you know, if you think you're there to do good and share some kind messages, it's like dumping a bucket of roses into the rubbish bin, right? So it's just a big cesspool for sleepiness. And you will be asleep, they will be asleep, and it will be sleepy people talking to sleepy people. So if you are trying to wake up, don't take a whole box of sleeping pills. And so it just depends. What are you trying to do here? And after they said that, there was a little while where I still struggled with social media because at the time I was addicted. But then the good news is that Gnosis provides tools. So then you just take those tools and use them for the problem, and they work. So we won't get into all of the tools, but as soon as the tools were focused back on the problem, then it was able to sort itself out. And the good news is once you're free from social media, then it's pretty boring. It doesn't have any hold on you, but so do so do all of the desires that you come free of. They don't have that kind of hypnotic enticement that they used to. And that's true liberation. I don't know if you wanted to add anything.
No, that sounds about right. Everything is really silly and so not serious once we're able to, you know, see through the illusion. And then it's so amazing that, you know, we took things so seriously and wasted so much time. on
Mhm.
nonsense, really. I mean, everything is nonsense. Like literally just the entire everything that's designed, all of civilization, everything is just it's completely ludicrous and nonsense because objective truth is so vastly different, and just wasting your time going through the things that we even find pleasurable and desirable comparatively to like what is real ecstasy and nirvana is just absurd. But you know, it's something that you can't really explain and has to be experienced, and that's the whole, you know, motto of any true esoteric mystery school. And you know that knowledge has to be gained through direct experience, and that direct experience is gained by dissolving the ego. So
And so that's like the key summary in all of this is be oriented towards the being and the path, and dissolution of the ego must take place. And that's how you know that it's a good teaching, is that that's going to be a big part of it, the psychological death. Just to close out, I wanted to share this little story. There was an exchange with another member of a Gnostic center, and this was a father, and he was attending with his daughter, his kind of young teenage daughter, preteen, and she went, as many families who are gnosis might do, she went to a Steiner school. So that was the school she was attending, and I was just curious and asking some questions about it. And the father made this comment about how, I don't remember what we were talking about, but he concluded with, because school is useless. And he had a very good point. He was just pointing out the farcity of the whole subscription of society. If you can zoom out, you can see it's a big joke, all of the things that people think matter, including this over identification with and amplification of university and career. So there you have it. That's the unified theory of life. We've been talking about career, studies, young adulthood through the lens of spirituality and the path. We hope this was helpful to you. And remember to be the light, be the change you want to see.
and remember to vibrate at a higher frequency and maximize your dharma for the entire collective. Love and light.
Thank you, and we'll see you next time.